Hey everyone, welcome to 2020. My name is Cory Peza. I'm here with my good friends Siobhán Cronin.
Hi.
And Benny Goodman.
Shalom.
Shalom. Today we got a treat for you. We have a very jazzy podcast.
Can you see the jazz hands that I'm making?
We're all putting up jazz hands right now.
Oh wait, is this
Jazz
the part?
hands.
Is this the part of the podcast where they can't see us?
They can use their
Yeah.
imaginations.
That's why I don't have my makeup on right now. It was very strategic. I saved time today.
No. Let's paint a picture. Siobhán is like wearing a bikini. She's standing in like Miami, and she's making giant jazz hands.
All right, so this week we have a very special guest, mostly because he's one of my dear friends from Miami. Known him for a while now.
There's
Just a
deer in
great-
Miami.
Yeah, it's rare, which is why I have very few friends in Miami, because it's hard to meet people I actually like all the time. Rodolfo Zuniga, who is also engaged to my best friend Caroline. So Caroline, if you're listening, we're going to talk to Rodolfo. But Rodolfo is a friend of mine and an incredible jazz musician, but not just jazz. He's, like a lot of the people we talk to, very versatile. He's studied kind of all the different styles of music.
No, he has an amazing story because he definitely lives it.
Well, he's Puerto Rican.
What are you talking about? He's from Costa Rica.
Whatever. You guys
So
have to
anyway,
listen to Get Below the Water with him. Like,
Exactly,
you wouldn't
so
know
without-
I'm not. Like, listen to the episode. He'll tell you.
Right. So without giving too much away, just a really interesting story of a musician who really, built his life and ended up in a giant touring act with a giant superstar. So incredible musician, my dear friend, Rodolfo Zuniga.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of 2020. I'm Benny Goodman. This is Cory Peza somewhere.
Yo.
And then we have Siobhán Cronin. I say that haphazardly because I don't know. I don't know what the point of that was, but it's been a long morning for me. And before I introduce my guest, I just want to let you know I got 2020'd by Verizon. I had to drive to 3 fucking Verizon stores to have them tell me 3 different things just to have them say, oh, we'll send you a phone. So, how's your day been, Rodolfo Zuniga, the amazing drummer that has taken his time to talk to us here? I almost 2020'd him because I was like, can I please talk to you later? Because Verizon sucks.
Right. Right.
But he has better things to do than talk to us later.
Exactly.
So
He actually has
now
stuff.
he has to deal with the annoyed, I just came back post Verizon Benny Goodman. And I bet after watching his drumming, he probably thought he was thinking of the other Benny Goodman. And little does he know, there's no jazz in my body.
Right.
None whatsoever.
I
sorry.
actually had heard about you from Siobhán before many times, and I always thought Benny
Lies.
Goodman. Wow, that's a perfect name.
I can only imagine what she was telling you. It must have been
Right. We can't say that here.
Right. He gets the unfiltered story of all of
Yeah,
my
exactly.
experiences. So they're always good things. I don't have a mean bone in my body.
Always good things. Yes.
So I want to first off say thank you to Rodolfo, who is a drummer, and I'm looking at your webpage here, and it looks like you work with like freaking everybody. But I'm gonna go with Julio Iglesias, who is, for those that don't know, in the United States, if you speak Spanish, this guy is tantamount to Michael Jackson. Am I correct? That he's like a phenomenon, because everything I've ever seen. So when I think of Michael Jackson in like the 90s, it's like crying people in Russia, like, oh my God. I watch Julio Iglesias videos, and it's the same.
Very
Except with
similar.
Spanish women
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
men.
Yeah. Well, Julio is kind of like Spanish Frank Sinatra. Kind of more in that vein. He's been in the business for 50 years. I've been with him about 5 or 6 years now, and I guess the last year was his 50th year tour. So
Wow.
yeah, he's been in the
Amazing.
business, and he certainly doesn't need to be out touring. So he obviously is and was made for this. He's dedicated his life to this, so I don't think he can stop, even though he certainly could have a long time ago. So yeah, he's still out there. I mean, we had a tour planned this year, of course, but it's a lot of cancellations. Yeah, unfortunately.
He makes me think about Rod Stewart because I played with Rod Stewart back in the day, and I just remember being like, how is this guy still? Well, this was a while ago, but
Rodolfo, every time I talk to Siobhán, she's like, I used to be in Zeppelin. Like, by the way, I also like ghost wrote a book with Edgar Allan Poe.
Right,
like,
exactly.
I figured out nuclear physics on my last weekend I had that Barack was gone.
Oh my gosh.
So like, why wouldn't you have played with Rod Stewart?
I promise him. No, but that when I think of Julio, I think of Rod Stewart because I remember when I played with him for the first time, I'm like, oh my God, this guy is still like so athletic and running around. And he's got all these like hot chicks on saxophones, like with the short skirts. And I'm like, well, what should I wear? And the answer was less is more. So anyway, I'm happy for all those guys out there killing it, still owning the stage.
Yes, music keeps you young.
It does.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, I'm just curious because I want to make a leap here because I was reading about you because, again, you know, it's one of those things where I want to know who I'm talking to, and I'm on your webpage, and it's like, listen to Iron Maiden and Soundgarden, and then I'm like, he plays with Julio, and then I go watch all your drumming. You're playing traditional and like wicked awesome, like Gene Krupa, like old school big band kind of. I mean, understand, I'm not a good musician, so this is just an idiot interpreting your drumming.
I've heard otherwise.
Yeah, whatever. It's
See,
lies.
I told you, I tell you good things about you.
But how do you go from Iron Maiden to Julio Iglesias, and then more importantly, what's your favorite Iron Maiden song?
Good question. Well, I'll start with The Number of the Beast first.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
I'm
Bruce?
just to go with the classics. I've also forgotten a lot of the names of the songs, to be honest. But
They're all the same.
but of course, I mean, I'm from Costa Rica, so I think that in Central America, growing up in the 90s, rock and grunge and that movement was you know, all my friends. I mean, that was huge. I was not I was not playing music at the time, but I was a huge fan. And yeah, I guess I started with Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, that movement, and then kind of shifted into Metallica and more grunge era.
You say you weren't playing music at the time. Was that type of music? Did that get you into it, or was that something that came later?
No, definitely that was the beginning for me. Like, so yeah, those bands are huge. I mean, and I think as a drummer, it's important to start with rock. That's the foundation, no matter where you're gonna go.
Why? Can you explain that? Because again, silly guitarist. Why would a drummer start with rock as opposed to something else?
At least to me, probably some people disagree, but I've had now that I teach a lot of jazz majors, and I've noticed that the students that started with, like in jazz band in high school and translated into college, but never really played like the basics of the instrument, you know, the snare, the hi-hat, and the bass drum, and really kind of found the love of playing those three, the basics, like as it should be played in the rock setting. I found that they have like a harder time with versatility. I mean, they're good already in a lot of more advanced things, like quote unquote. But I think that the basics of the instrument are those. You know, it's like it would be like playing electric bass and start learning just playing walking bass lines, like what an upright bass would be doing.
When I was in jazz band, one time my jazz teacher wheeled in a porno because he said none of us were playing with balls. I went to an all-guy school, by the way, so we can just say
this person is not in prison.
No, he's not in prison. But he said groove to this. And I gotta tell you, our drummer stepped it up.
I do believe that's a felony, but that's if it worked, then
You're dropping all sorts of bombs on this show.
That's fine. Well, I'll tell you this, but it's true because you want to know what? I play with a jazz guitar player that teaches at Berklee School of Music, and I've introduced him to this thing called a distortion box. He's like, "Oh my God, this almost sounds like David Gilmour or something, like a guitar player I'd listen to," and he's like, "Yeah." You know, so it's very interesting to see people that come from a different school. But the thing I think I got from the rock side of it and from the porno was you should play with some balls. You should play with some machismo and some bravado, because when you do that, and again, and you watch even some of the greatest jazz drummers, you know what I mean? Like they played with some balls.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they also had that gravitas. Like, I mean, listen to Buddy Rich talk. He'll tell you he was the best.
Oh, of course.
Do you think it has anything to do with like the theatrics of rock music and the big hits and the very exaggerated backbeats? Is that like kind of something that maybe if you start from that purely jazz standpoint where you're very technical and very by the book, maybe you might think that's almost outside the lines?
Yeah, that has a lot to do with it, and I think that shows you how to hit the instrument, how to get the sound out of the instrument. They're like completely different worlds.
Yeah.
To just play a backbeat and get a good sound out of the snare and the bass drum. Just that is an art form unto its own, and you got to learn how to do that. So I think that you're not exposed to that if you start by learning how to swing and how to play in a big band and those sort of things. I mean, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I sometimes play more jazz than rock. And I love it. I mean, I moved to the U.S. to study jazz, but I do think that there's a lot of value to learning sound on the drums first, and I think that what you're describing, Cory, is a great way to learn it. And I think it's better to start there and then to evolve to other nuances. At least the way I look at it.
Well, let's go back to you then, Rodolfo, because what I do love about you and what I tell everyone whenever I'm telling them about you is that you're like amazing and also super versatile. And I think that's so, incredible to see you in all these different settings. And I'm curious if you could tell some of the listeners going back to how you got into drums and what were some of the foundations of your training, what made you want to move to the US, like maybe take everyone through the progression of beginning to now.
Well, I appreciate that.
Don't encourage her.
Yeah. Elaborate on no.
Go on. Tell me more about me, Siobhan.
Yeah, exactly. Don't let me stop you. No, I for sure started. Well, I'm from Costa Rica, San Jose, Costa Rica, and I grew up in the city. And most of my friends were musicians, even though I was doing sports and things like that growing up, and I never thought I was gonna be doing music, mostly because I just didn't think that I was gonna be good at playing an instrument. I don't know. I just never had it in my mind. So I played baseball and soccer, and I thought I was gonna be a baseball player, and then I played, believe it or not, pool.
I thought that was mostly Dominican people.
Yeah, Costa Rica is not big. Yeah.
I only said that because I'm Big Poppy. I'm not actually saying that. I don't know what I'm talking about. We have like a bunch of people from Costa Rica. Like, we play badass baseball, asshole.
Yeah. No, it's not true. Maybe in Cuba,
Well, fair enough.
for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah. But I was into it, and but because I had mostly musician friends, eventually that translated into I should start trying an instrument just for fun. And my friends had played since they were 6 years old, and one of them, moved to the States with me to go to school and everything. So they influenced me a lot, and I ended up, once I started playing drums, which I always did love the drums growing up with rock music. So once I started playing, I just got super obsessed.
So let me ask you, when you were growing up and you started playing drums and you realized baseball, cool, drums, maybe this is it. What band did you fantasize playing in? Like, because again, I'm seeing on here, like Soundgarden. Like, were you on stage playing Jesus Christ Pose in your head instead of Matt Cameron? Or like,
Yes.
where were you?
Absolutely. Matt Cameron's still one of my top rock drummers ever. I still watch videos on him, and I'm amazed.
I was just watching videos with him yesterday because actually, we just interviewed David Abruzzese. And,
nice.
And I went and watched this
Another
video.
great drummer.
Why all the Pearl Jam drummers were good or not good. And then we went to Matt Cameron. And I love David, and he's a really good friend.
Yeah.
But like, he kind of brushed over them. But I'm like, the one guy I actually really, really, of all of them, well, besides Matt Chamberlain, who just plays with everybody, Matt Cameron, when I saw Soundgarden and I heard Jesus Christ Pose live, I was just like, it was the first time, and I've listened to Soundgarden for years, but it was the first time I was like, who the hell is that drummer?
Yeah, he's incredible. I think he he's probably, I mean, top 5 alive rock drummers for me. And he's super, like, he's like a, you know, the epitome of what I like, which is like musical and very, very simple rock drummer. There's nothing there that's too fancy or anything. He is all about the music, but his sound is incredible. And he's, like Siobhán was saying, he's super versatile because he's a little more on the nuance side than most of the drummers, I think, that were in that scene at the time in the grunge days. And he was in the early grunge days with.
Oh, he was in Temple. For people that don't know, Soundgarden, Temple of the Dog. He's now permanently the drummer of Pearl Jam. Currently, but he did the whole Temple of the Dog thing. One of my friends was just Paul Lorenzo was complaining that he went to Lollapalooza, and when Paul talks, it's always like 30 years ago, like 93. He was like, all the guys from Temple of the Dog were there. Why couldn't they just walked on stage and played? That was the best record. And to be honest with you, Pushing Forward Back is also one of my favorite Matt Cameron songs. In fact, we should just make this whole show
about
2020 to Rodolfo, and instead let's just talk about Soundgarden.
Yeah, I know.
They play it 7/8 so well. It's wicked cool.
Yeah, it is. I mean, yeah, well, it was Soundgarden, definitely Matt Cameron, but my all-time favorite band is Living Colour, and
nice.
Will Calhoun, I think, is probably my top rock drummer.
Our manager actually directed. Well, no, I think he say he edited the Living Cult of Personality video.
Oh wow! Ooh.
Yeah, so if you ask Siobhán, she has connections to Living Colour.
I never know who I have connections to. That's what I rely on you for.
You're a girl. You have connections to everybody. It's called the internet. Just slip into a DM.
All right.
Like,
so
dear
going
Mr.
back
Gates.
to it. Oh my God. So Rodolfo, okay. So at what age were you when you picked up drums for the first time? Because I think a lot of people are interested to hear like the different paths that people are on. Because I think there's a general understanding that you have to start super young with everything, like 4 years old, or else you're not going to be successful. And I think that's not true. So maybe you could tell a little bit about when you started and what happened from there.
Yeah, I mean, I started late, and that's probably the reason why I always thought, I'm never going to do music. I started when I was like 16, almost 17.
Wow.
And
Late bloomer.
Yeah, so, and I moved to the U.S. when I was 20. So it was pretty quick and I was pretty obsessed with it. So
it's depressing to people like me who've been practicing all of my life, and I'm still nowhere near as good as you. Thanks.
That's not, I don't think that's...
I've seen your videos. You're extremely impressive.
Thank you so much. But I think you're right, Siobhán. I think that you should do what you want to do in life, and you should at least give it a shot. And I approached it from the point of view of like, okay, I'm gonna this has been a sudden thing. I'm gonna move to the US, I'm gonna try it. And everything is a win, because I thought, yeah, if I'm expecting this to fail, and
setting the bar low is always very helpful. Yeah.
So
it didn't.
You went from, playing baseball in high school to probably playing baseball stadiums in Spain. What's that feel like?
Yeah, that's been another really, really nice surprise. Just to have had that experience. I mean, I'm hoping it'll continue a few more years, but I'm happy that it happened. That I've been doing it for like 5 years, and I mean these gigs, that touring scene that existed back in Julio's time, I think that's definitely slowing down a lot from the people I've met on the road. It's that huge stadium thing, and like the 150 dates a year in big halls, and just being able to finance that sort of thing. And just the world has changed a lot. That's the way it used to be, for sure, for a long time. But I think that it's slowing down a lot. I mean, the venues are smaller.
Netflix.
Yeah.
It's like, why would I want to go see you when I can just watch the documentary on Julio?
Well, I think people also just want to be closer to the artist. Like when we went to Japan and we were opening for Hyde, and he's someone that also plays in Japan, like huge arenas or stadiums or whatever. And he instead decided to do a long run of shows where it's like 12 dates in a 4,000 cap venue or 3,000 cap, so that people can get closer to the front. So he could have easily just done one show for 50,000 people, but instead he did a series of shows so that people could get a little closer and have more of that interaction.
Cory and I did a series of
Yep.
shows once where we had like 5 shows, and between them, I think we had 50 people, maybe 55.
Yeah.
That was after drink tickets, by the way. So.
Those are people that wandered in off the street. So Rodolfo, like, what was the bridge between that moving to the U.S. and playing those giant venues and kind of getting into the professional realm? Like, where'd you start? I know you don't usually go from 16-year-old learning drums to playing stadiums. So, what was the path there?
Yeah, well, no, I went to school. I moved here because I was lucky to be part of this tuition exemption program between Costa Rica and like state universities in Florida. So it was really cheap.
So because you were from Costa Rica, they hooked you up.
Yeah, there's
That's awesome.
this linkage that still exists today, which is the reason I came to Miami.
But I love this though, because people, there's so many people that complain about like foreigners coming into our country, and I'm not political, but like you got help to come to the United States, to go to school. I read on your page that you have a master's degree, which Siobhan's like, I got 2. Actually, I think you have 2, don't you? And at 16, you start drums, and now you're doing better at drumming than 99.9999% of drummers. I could be in the United States, born here, and try as hard as I can, and the most I could do is maybe get 300 people to Jared's place on a Thursday night. And you're like, I'll come to the United States, get a master's degree, and then I'll just go tour with the biggest guy ever that spoke Spanish. Ever.
Well, I'm sure there's obviously a path in between, start to finish. So I think that's what we're interested in. Yes, because I think...
Is that the one where George Carlin shows up and says, get into the telephone booth, and then they go there and find Beethoven with Keanu Reeves?
No, but Rodolfo, maybe talk about what you got, you got to Miami and you went to school, and maybe talk about how you got like what Cory was asking, into the professional world and that transition, because I think there are a lot more steps than people think. A lot of people might think, oh yeah, I'll just get my credentials and then I'm going to get a great gig, and there are a lot of small things that go into it along the way that can change your path.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a way to do it. I think the more you plan to do things a certain way to get a certain gig, it just, at least for me, that hasn't worked that way. So I just went to school, and most of my connections still to this day, and people that I've toured with or I've recorded with or that hooked me up with opportunities have come from school, from the people I went to school with. Mm-hmm. And
networking.
Yeah. And just, I did a bachelor's and a master's, and I was always really motivated because it was a hard thing to move from my country to here, so I was like trying to make the most out of every opportunity, and especially play. I mean, I always said, and I know that Siobhán does this, can connect with this because I know she does this too. Just like she sees the opportunity in playing as much as possible and loves playing, and that was what I did too. I just said yes to every gig I could, and I'm just now starting to learn to. Well, maybe I shouldn't say yes to everything.
Sounds like a high-class problem.
Right. I am lucky that,
it's just
that I can
like
do
when
that.
I got caller ID the first time, I'm like, nah.
It's funny. I think there's a lot of merit to the say yes to everything. And I think that gets, like, a lot of people I talk to that are successful, that gets them almost like 90% of the way through their career. And then there comes that time
out Cory
where
at his shows, 5 and 7, CoryPaysit.com. 5 and 7 shows, CoryPaysit.com.
Okay.
You said yes.
Okay, I'm lost now. And then there does come a point where that almost becomes detrimental because you're taking on so much that your work either suffers or you're missing out on opportunities because you're too overbooked. So you're saying just now you're kind of getting to the point where you're able to get out of that mindset and maybe be more selective over what you take and what you're doing. Yeah,
absolutely. And I still have a hard time just because I'm still stuck in that mode of like, no, maybe I should just try to do this. I land at the, I know Siobhán does this all the time. Yeah. I land at noon and I could do a session at 3 and then there's a gig I can make at 9. Yeah. And then I'm miserable through the whole thing, and stressed out. Yeah. And then I feel good. I made it work. But I mean, in reality, it's probably better at some point to start being more productive in a different way.
Put value on your mental health too.
and that.
Yeah.
So let me ask you
course.
this: what's the craziest thing that you ever turned down? Like someone called you up to do something, and you're just like, I don't feel like this is my vibe.
Well, I did turn down Julio once or twice before I actually was in the tour. Yeah.
Okay, you have to explain this. How did this even happen? And first off, how do you turn down that guy? Like, I got asked to, I think, play one time with like the third bass player for like Vixen or something, and I was like, okay.
Wait, before
Like, you're-
No, go ahead. Finish your story.
but I'm just curious. Like, Jason Costa from All That Remains had said that Phil, the lead singer, had waited like a year for him. Nobody waits for me. And then Julio calls you, and if you said no to me, I'd just be like, all right, Paul, what are you doing? He waited around. Like, how did this happen? And how do you say no to that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Julio himself doesn't wait for anybody. So I got called. I got recommended on the gig from a friend named Clay Perry, who's a keyboard player in the band. He's been with him for about 12 years, and him and I met playing gigs in Miami, jazz gigs, and became really good friends. And he called me for it a couple of times back years ago, maybe like 8 years ago. Like, would you be at that time they were working a lot. So it would have meant being out of town 6 months.
Making so much money playing stadiums. Sounds terrifying.
Yeah. I also was a little terrified of it at that time, and I had never done something like that. So I was like, well, that means I got to stop my life, and I'm a little terrified of this, and I have to answer like within 24 hours, usually, because that's the way it works.
Yeah. Yep.
So then when did you say yes?
I said no.
But when did you finally say yes? I'm going to do that. If your friend, was it your keyboard friend, called you one time and you were just like, nah, I'll do it this time?
Yeah, I think he it was the third time in like probably like 4 years that he tried so he just sent me a text and he was like, I know what you're gonna say, and I know you have some teaching gigs and you're busy, but how would you feel about dropping everything, and we need like an emergency replacement, even if it's temporary. They were in the middle of a tour at that time, and they had some problems with the drummer that had just started, and Julio just wanted somebody else there quick. And at that time, like, I was going through some changes in my life, like new things, and I just said, man, whatever. I feel more confident now. I'll give it a shot. It ended up happening that Julio decided to cancel the next few months. So I was going to go out there with no rehearsal or knowledge of the music. And it ended up being, I went out there like 3 months after with no rehearsal, but a lot of knowledge of the music.
Yeah, I remember when you were preparing for that. Yeah.
There's a lot of parallels to some of the other guests that we've talked to about just getting that call, like, hey,
be ready.
Are you ready? Like, can you do this? Like, that story pops up over and over again, and it's something that I think it probably just permeates through life in general, is being ready for those opportunities, and how that can, even if you didn't necessarily want it, it's a path that you hop down that is seemed to do pretty well for yourself. So that's very cool to hear.
Yeah, no, I'm very grateful.
Another thing too, though, that I think just came up now that's interesting is that I think a lot of people think that, you know, your life is just open and you're waiting for this gig and it comes at the right time. And a lot of times timing is an issue, and it really takes a lot of thought and stress to decide to take a risk on something, because, you know, in our world, nothing is guaranteed. Even if you get a really big gig, you're like a contract worker in a lot of ways, you know.
Oh, yeah.
So you could take a risk, give up a teaching job or something that seems secure, you know, and go off and then come back and say, okay, well, I just sacrificed all this stuff and it didn't work out. So, you know, that's another part of it too, is knowing when to take that leap, and like when you feel secure enough and, you know, your life, or the willingness to allow changes to happen without that guarantee, you know?
Oh, yeah, totally. For me, it was like that because I was pretty happy doing what I was doing, playing a bunch of jazz, which is what I wanted to do. And I had some teaching gigs at university, which I'm still grateful to have, but it was going to be a big deal to find a substitute or come up with a plan for them to let me do this and all that. So I definitely did have a lot of stuff that I enjoyed doing that I had to like quickly decide, okay, maybe if this goes well, maybe I'm going to have to stop all this other stuff. But
Yeah.
It all worked. It all worked out. I was lucky that yeah.
Well, yeah, and that was great that it did work out, because this reminds me of a story with Starset that when I first got asked to play, they were actually talking to a cellist that they were asking to be the cellist in the band. And
Did they ask her what type of cello she played?
No, well, it was a guy, first of all, but no, but he was like, he basically had the open offer to take the gig, and he was up against the same thing, like, oh, do I want to cancel all these orchestra concerts, and do I want to go away for this long? And I think he was also finishing his master's at the time, or some degree program, so it involved having to work out a lot of things. And ultimately he decided, like, oh no, I really don't want to take this risk right now, but like, I'm totally in to do your next tour. But then of course in the meantime they had to find someone else, and they found Jonathan, who was the cellist that was in Starset when I first joined. And, he was a great fit at the time until, he eventually retired from his position. But yeah, so this original guy, when the next tour came around, it was kind of too late for him at that point, and the choice wasn't his anymore, which is, and things like that do happen also. So there is a balance of, knowing when you have the opportunity to say no or when you need to say yes, if that's really what you want to do.
So I'm really curious. So again, I'm seeing Led Zeppelin here, like, Bonham, and we got Matt Cameron, and we got Nico McBrain from Iron Maiden. And now you're like straight up jazz. And I love it. I mean, I went and watched it, but going and reading your interview, I wouldn't have ever thought this guy's rocking out to Number of the Beast. What made you go from, growing up in Costa Rica, listening to Soundgarden and Nirvana or whatever, to being like, jazz is my thing? Because I'm a rock guy, true and true, but when I went and played jazz in the jazz band, even having the name Benny Goodman, I felt very displaced. I'm like, what do you mean there's a 13 after the chord? It's getting bar mitzvahed? And like, nah, dude, I don't even know what this means. I I just know the G. And is there sharp or flat?
It's funny, you read my mind. I was literally going to ask the same question, because I think I have a very similar story to Ben. I'm grew up rock metal, and I did jazz band in high school. And I think jazz band in high school turned me off from the genre, because I was playing with a bunch of idiots that couldn't tune their freaking trumpets. So what is it about jazz that drew you in that direction?
Well, maybe because I had no high school jazz band experience.
That must be it.
Yeah.
No one brought in a porno and said play better.
Oh my God.
Is that really a felony? I'm sorry. I didn't realize.
It wasn't back then.
He was a great jazz teacher, by the way.
It is in 2020.
He was amazing.
In 2020, he'd be in jail, but back then.
Right, back in the day. It
He
was
used to always say,
fine.
Benny, don't listen to Van Halen before you come to practice.
No, my same friends that got me into rock, they were like taking lessons, and they were like, man, jazz. I've just started learning some jazz voicings and some chords, guitar players, and man, this is so great. They started turning me on to jazz records, and I remember and they told me, oh, and the ultimate for drummers is if you learn to play jazz. That's what I used to
really
get from them. Yeah, like so. And a lot of the guys. So
basically, you can follow people that have no idea what they're doing, making up completely random compositions, but yet you can make it seem deliberate.
God.
Pretty much.
Isn't that what jazz is?
Kind of is. Yeah.
It's a lot. I mean, you watch some of this stuff, and like, look, I know that I make it sound demeaning, but like, there's a lot of these super savant level players that are doing completely random, haphazard stuff that you go, how the hell does the drummer and bass player follow them? And I still don't know. I don't even know. Like, you could play 25-minute jazz piece, and I can't tell you one key they played in.
Right.
Like, what's the root note?
I know it's very complex because of the combination of the improvisation and the established part that's already there. So obviously there's free improvisation as well, that to me is even more challenging. I just did an album recently of all no preconceived anything, we just went into the studio and played for 3 hours.
Wow.
Nothing, just saxophone, bass, and drums.
But that boasts a philosophical question. Do you believe in destiny? Are things predetermined? Because that really takes out all of the bullshit as far as freestyle or whatever, because really you had to play those notes.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first time I did an album like that, so it's just free. So
it was fun though.
Yeah, super fun, and I'm really excited about this music more than I've been in a long time.
You want to plug the music? Where can we hear this? Like,
stop
talking about it. I want to hear it.
We just finished mastering, so I don't actually have it maybe I could play you.
Well, don't worry. Like this won't be out for another 7 months, so Cory will probably have a link at the bottom.
The name of the or where people could find it when it's out.
Yeah. So it's with friends of mine that I used to play with a lot. They both live in New York now. This saxophonist called Eddie Paz was an amazing player. Has a even crazier story than I do, because he played always clarinet, classical clarinet, and basically moved to Miami from Cuba, and his teacher told him, like, we need saxophonists, tenor saxophonists in the jazz program. But this is already in college. He's never played jazz before. And he just is one of the baddest tenor saxophonists I've ever heard in my life playing jazz.
That's kind of what happened with Cory. I said, there's too many guitar players in our band, but if you want to play bass, like we could totally play with us.
Jeez.
You see, it happens.
Yeah, less strings, it's easier.
Yeah, and another friend of mine from Costa Rica named Kenneth Jimenez,
Yeah.
and they both play exclusively free stuff in New York since they moved out there. So, so I just basically trying, and there's a whole scene for that. So they're involved in that scene. There's a vocabulary there, but it's also completely wide open, and the challenge is to make music out of that.
I gotta tell you what you said about the drums, as far as jazz being the ultimate. I've been taking guitar lessons because I'm not very good, and the stuff that's been resonating the most with me is jazz, because it's so out of my realm that when I'm playing 13th chords or half diminished chords or whatever, and these weird voicings, I feel like I'm a superhero. I feel like if I saw someone else playing it, I'd be like, how do you do that? So like for me, the coolest part has been discovering these strange voicings and how, with bass motion, all that it sounds cool playing all these strange, weird chords, because I only knew like Nirvana, Nevermind, and that was about it. So to learn how to play again a 13th chord or add 9, or like this is the 4 types of 7th chords. Wait, there's a minor 7th versus a major 7th versus a natural. What does this even mean? But then you hear it and you're like, oh, it finally makes sense, because it's not in Iron Maiden. You don't go, that was a minor 7th.
Right.
Dave Murray's genius.
And aside from the harmonic, depth, there's also rhythmic, and just, I feel like jazz is the ultimate test of focus and practice, because like I've seen that so many times. I've gone to Rodolfo's gigs in Miami, and it's just like everything's done from memory for the most part. You have so many
like
bars.
RoboCop going G, F. They added that.
No.
This works. This is non-diatonic. This is diatonic.
No, but what impresses me the most is like, it's okay, someone's going to play a solo and it's so many bars, but then the meter might change. And like, we make this joke all the time, like I got lost in the form,
yeah.
Because it's like, I watch that and I'm like, oh my God, you're off for like a second and suddenly you're in a different spot and you have to improvise, but then it's also unclear what the meter is because the improvisation is so free within the structure that I can agree. I feel like it is the ultimate.
Well, that brings up a good question. I have to ask you, Rodolfo. So Eddie Van Halen explains, or people explain Van Halen style, that a lot of the times he has weird groupings of notes. So he might play 7 instead of 8, but then 5. When you're doing all these weird time signature changes and all that, do you ever like get messed up and you're like a beat behind, but you're like, I'll just play the next one in 7 and catch back up, and like they'll figure it out, and they're like, it was a polyrhythm.
There's that for sure. I mean, there's
our listeners are all like, click.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like jazz polyrhythms. Like
we're a very highbrow podcast, and we're just educating.
I know what happened to you guys. Yeah, I mean, you can still erase this. It's fine.
By the way, we're brought to you, just so you know, our sponsor, not jazz. Close
not
though.
at all.
Close.
Yeah.
LostSymphony.com. So I don't know if we told Rodolfo, but we actually did this podcast so we could sell metal music.
I figured there was a catch.
Yeah.
Of course, you needed me for that. I don't know.
I know. Well, because we know that jazz is the ultimate. So all of the metal drummers can go back and watch you and go, oh my God. And I will tell you, I encourage you to go watch Jason Costa, who we just talked to, who plays in All That Remains, but he plays traditional grip. So he plays a very jazz style of drumming, but at 300 BPM blast beats. So you might appreciate that. It
Absolutely.
is.
That's really hard to do.
And I'll tell you, you want to know how you can do that? Rent a room that floods itself, create a hyperclimate, play in 130 degrees, and then turn the BPM up 15 to 20 BPM
1,000.
faster.
Yes.
Yeah. And then if you can do that, then maybe you can do it for real with your band.
Yeah.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
amazing. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, no, this is fascinating though. I think even though maybe it's not as accessible to everyone, jazz is kind of the one mysterious genre for me. Like I can handle crazy prog rock in every different time signature and different inversions and I can do all the crazy chords, but yeah, jazz still is that enigma off in the corner.
The funny thing, and I was this reminded me of something that Benny was saying about the chord voicings and all these, the 13 and the 9th and the 6th and all these things. I mean, some of the still most.
Wait a minute, I didn't say 6. There's a 6th chord.
Oh my God. Let him talk.
All the most amazing guitar players that really you hear that invented those voicings on the guitar. Those guys were completely self-taught, didn't read music, did not know what they were playing, or at least did not think of it in those terms. Like,
Do you think Vernon Reid still knows what he's playing the guitar solo in Living Color now? Because I don't know what he's playing.
Well,
I've heard
he's
it 1,000 times.
But those guys were jazz guys. Those guys, Vernon Reid and Will Calhoun.
Well, that's probably why they're awesome, right? Because
Yeah.
they started with the ultimate and then they lowered themselves down to rock.
They were all, they were versatile from the beginning. They went to Berkeley as well, and they met in the jazz program there. But Wes Montgomery or Grant Green, I don't know if you know those guys.
I do.
Yeah, super groovy guitar players and amazing at the harmonic voicing material, but they're completely self-taught. So all that stuff only, I mean, who cares if you know what it is, as long as it's part of your playing, as long as it serves the music, serves the purpose of the music. And I think for them, that's how it started. And that's why it became harmonic theory or jazz harmonic theory. But they learned just from the same sources that, Siobhán learns, from classical music. So, I mean, that harmony, those chords, all that was around for centuries before. So I think nowadays there's a lot of, we give the educational or academia part a lot of importance of how to learn, and that kind of separates you from actually just playing other styles, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, so you have rock people are kind of your blue-collared, like, we just fix things and put stuff together, whereas the rocket scientists are playing jazz because they actually know how to make the chords work when you're playing in 7/8 and adding a 13th to it.
Right, but like Cory was saying, he plays the odd meters on the prog stuff. And I mean, it's really the same thing. You're just like thinking of it a different way,
Right,
but
yeah.
it's,
You want to know
the same material.
one of my favorite stories about odd meters? If you go and watch the original Terminator soundtrack, I want to say it's in like 13 or 15, something ridiculous. And they had asked the original composer if he could, chart it all out so they could, do a symphonic version. He goes, I have no idea what you're talking about. And they said, how did you choose the time signature for it? And he goes, what do you mean? And it turns out that back in the 80s, he had a sample, like a drum machine, and then they cut off like a half of a beat, and he just went with it and played it because he just made a loop, and now it's in like some great, I'll have to look it up, but some ridiculous time signature. And if you listen to it, it's like very unnerving. Which
is why it works so well. Yeah.
But that's why it's so cool because this guy messed up, but because he messed up, he made a really interesting theme to a very crazy movie.
He made jazz.
He made jazz.
Right.
He messed up.
You can't mess
and
up.
It was music.
It's just jazz.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He messed up in rock and roll. And then it turned into jazz. It's like a butterfly, caterpillar to butterfly.
No, but that's the beautiful thing, though, is that not everything has to be preceded by some specific education or like path. A lot of what you learn to do is, doing it in practice, doing gigs, playing the music, and then making mistakes, and sometimes it turns out cool. That's what I've learned.
Yeah, not to say that you shouldn't like get educated about what you want to learn.
Course. Yeah.
But it also is, college programs also. I think it's easier to put people in categories, like the classical guys, the jazz guys, or etc. The production guys. When in reality, should be all the same.
When you're doing these free-form jams, do you ever have like the bass player look at the drummer like he fucked up?
Totally. I've gotten that look many times.
Dude, we told you we could do whatever you want.
Right.
But not that.
Yeah.
Like I would do anything for love, but I won't do that.
Right.
What is that you can't do in jazz that makes the bass player turn around in anger?
Well, there's just like in any style, there's all kinds of people in every genre. So even though jazz is improvised, I definitely have played with a lot of guys that want you to read their minds.
Mm-hmm.
Do they hijack you? Like, do you get hijacked? Like sometimes you go on stage in front, and then like the bass player's like, they're gonna follow me, or this is gonna be a really bad time.
Oh yeah, man, it's the same as like any other thing in life, and there's so much personality. Yeah.
Who's the one?
Oh yeah.
So in a jazz band, who's the person that has the lead singer's disease? So if you play instrumental jazz, is it the guitar player that has the attitude? Is it the trumpet player? Like, is it the sax player that are the assholes? Who are the assholes in jazz?
I think all of them. All of them. Because all of them.
That is amazing.
That's
That's
so
the best
funny.
thing. That's so
All
gonna
of
make
us.
one of our moments that we're gonna
All
put
of
up online. Who are the assholes in jazz? All of us.
No,
Yeah.
but Rodolfo, I have to say you have the hardest job because I'm not a jazz trained musician, but Rodolfo has a band called Surfaces for which he wrote a bigger ensemble to include a string trio. So me and then Caroline and then another cellist will play with his ensemble. And I am always relying on Rodolfo. Like no matter what the crazy meter is, I know that there's some hit that he's going to do that's going to like keep me on track. And we're reading sheet music, you know?
Right.
So I feel like
Does he have the drum faces that you follow? Like, can you read his mind by going, he's about to do a paradiddle?
No, Rodolfo's the most relaxed looking person. Like whenever I see you playing at Laniap, there's a very cool like wine and jazz bar in Miami. It's just like, no matter how crazy it is, all this stuff, whatever, he's just like chill, you know, very just like into it.
So
like,
does that
so
take
relaxed.
practice? Does that take practice? Or did you used to have drummer faces? Because I know a lot of drummers
no.
have to try to get rid of that. I had to get rid of my guitar faces growing up. Because,
It's the bass players that have the
Yeah.
faces. Every
yeah.
jazz group, it's the bass
Well, just so you know,
players.
and before he answers, Paul Lorenzo doesn't have any faces, and we joked around with him one time. Corey and I were in a band with Paul.
Paul's the drummer of Lost Symphony, by the way.
Yeah, so Paul's the drummer
Oh,
of our
okay,
band,
cool.
Lost Symphony. He's an insane drummer, and he'd always play the same kind of thing. He's like, and you're like, but we're playing rock. Yeah. We're like, dude, can't you look mad at us? I'm like, so what face do you want me to make? This is just my face. So like a year ago, I go and watch his video with his metal band. He's now put on a mask. And it just has like all kinds of stuff. He's like, I found my face. But like, that's the funny part is that like Paul, he went from he never made faces to like, well, what do you want me to do? Like I just make the face when I play piano, like I'm smelling cookies. Because that's just what it looks like. You know what I mean? Not like I'm actively thinking of smelling cookies.
Well, what was I forgot what the question
I was just curious if that's
You got
a conscious effort to maintain that calm demeanor, or if you ever found yourself doing that big hit on the crash cymbal, you got to get that drummer face going.
Over your head with the gong.
Yeah. Nowadays, I definitely am thinking a lot more about keeping a better posture and technique for sure. Just because I've noticed on recordings what are the weak points, and it's always like some bad physical movement.
Well, it's so important you say that, because one of the things that a lot of the metal drummers we talk to that are technical talk about guys like a guy like Gene Holgan, who used to wear weights around his ankles and stuff, but now he walks with a cane because he's like debilitated himself by playing, again, blast beats at God knows what speed, but he's destroyed his body. You know, you hear about Neil Peart could barely play because he was in so much physical pain from not being properly trained in technique, where you see a guy like Matt Chamberlain or a guy like you who play with such finesse, and you're like, he's not hurting himself. When I play guitar, like I have giant electric shocks that go up my arm if I even play a G chord.
Yeah, I think I'm doing the opposite now. Is I'm really trying to be more relaxed and more steady in everything. And I used to not care too much about it, like just think, well, whatever serves the music at that point or whatever is happening. But I mean, just on recordings, you just know, like from analyzing myself, well, what's creating this is why I don't feel comfortable doing this is most easy to correct if I really focus on the physical.
Yeah.
physical thing.
I think even in classical music, this is an issue because a lot of people don't think about, let's say, fitness or like posture, like your physique as affecting the music at all. Everyone thinks it's all, intellectual, but there's a huge part that's physical that contributes to even your sound, whether, of course, preserving your health in terms of, being strong in the right places and not overworking things. But yeah, I mean, the physical is hugely important in any instrument.
Yeah. I mean, some of my favorite guys like Steve Vai, guys like that, guitar players. I mean, those guys are like...
The guy from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
He was on that, right?
We were joking around because we mentioned him, and I was like, "Oh yeah, the guy from Bill and Ted." And our marketing guy Jason was like, "He's done other things."
Yeah, for sure. Like play with this guy. I don't know if you could.
Oh, he was only in Crossroads.
Oh, nice. Frank Zappa.
Frank Zappa for president.
Yeah.
Okay,
Nice.
so this brings up a very important question for you. Vinnie Colaiuta, Terry Bozzio, or Dunbar?
Man, you really know the Frank Zappa drummers, man. I commend you for that.
I love the 69 albums that he made.
I commend you for that. That's my.
And I think Don't Eat the Yellow Snow is next to Sgt. Pepper's.
Yeah, that's my shit. Well, Vinnie Colaiuta is like my all-time favorite drummer. Period.
But okay, hold on.
Versatility-wise,
Does Terry
there's nobody
Bozzio
like
not
that.
get any credit for being the devil in Titties and Beer?
Oh man, well he's amazing at everything, and he's as weird as can be.
Well, okay, you're great. I want to ask you this. So Vinnie Colaiuta plays perfectly. I love Vinnie because he sounds great. He played with Megadeth. And then he plays with Sting, and then and he's perfect with everything. Whereas Terry Bozzio, I feel like, cannot be controlled in a band. He could be in Frank Zappa because it's Frank Zappa, but he cannot exist like Missing Persons is in a band. It's drums surrounded by other people.
Yeah, yeah,
so,
totally.
Like, do you feel that way? Like, do you think Terry Bozzio could play jazz?
Oh yeah, he can do anything he wants, but he's beyond that, man.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He's beyond music, dude. He's just playing radios. Like when I saw him the first time, just so everyone knows, for those that don't know Terry Bozzio, for nerdy drummers that go, Neil Peart's the best, someone goes, Terry Bozzio, man. And when I saw him the first time, he did a drum clinic, and he explained how all of his cymbals, his radial Sabian cymbals, were all tuned to different stuff. So he plays like Bach progressions on his cymbals. And I'm like, but why?
Exactly. That's my question too. But yeah, he can do it. I mean, he's just incredible, but he's also very eccentric, and that's why he was such an amazing fit for Zappa.
Well, that's why he was great playing Titties and Beer. For those that don't know, because I'm sure Siobhán hasn't heard it, there's a great song about the devil arguing with somebody over titties and beer, trying to exchange their soul in exchange for titties and beer. And the devil in this case is the drummer, Terry Bozzio. Now, Terry Bozzio is a very extremely serious, incredible, like Olympic level drummer. Like anyone you could think of, he's still better. And he's still sitting there the whole time going, hey, titties, beer. And that's what I love about Frank Zappa, is he made guys like Steve Vai and Terry Bozzio yell out titties and beer.
It's funny.
And that's what I love about him.
I've heard of Titties and Beer, but it's a country song. I've never heard of this other one.
I was going to say, this sounds like Devil Went Down to Georgia.
Yeah.
Similar storyline.
It's similar.
Rodney Carrington, it's like a joke. So I've never heard of the other one.
All right, first off, I'm going to send you all an email, not to him. Obviously, he knows Frank Zappa. But I'm going to send you a live version of Titties and Beer.
I look forward to this.
And for all those that have not heard Frank Zappa, I will go on record as saying that I think he's the modern Beethoven of our time.
Yes.
And that anyone that goes, do you want to hear something on a different level? It's Frank Zappa. People go, the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, blah, blah. Yes, those are all the best bands as far as songs that normal human beings can understand. But if you're like Siobhán, good at violin, and you go, The Devil Went Down to Georgia is plateauing for me, you go to Frank Zappa.
She agrees.
If you know what, honestly, I avoided for the longest time learning that song because whenever I say I play violin, that's the first thing that like your average person will say is like, oh, do you know how to play Devil Went Down to Georgia? And the funny story about that is I resisted this for so long that I ended up on a freaking live radio broadcast on WJJO radio in Madison, Wisconsin. And they were like, oh, can you play Devil Went Down to Georgia? And I was like, well, I know what it sounds like, but like I haven't actually learned it. He's like, well, let's see what happens if you just try. And I played the right rhythm, but the totally wrong notes, and it sounded fine. But he's like, that was awesome, but that was not it. And I was like so embarrassed. I'm like, shit, I gotta learn this song. So I finally went and learned it because I had to play it for a gig, and I like shared it with the.
Do you like it now?
I mean, it's a catchy song, but you know, I think of violin as like classical violin. That's like fiddle, which is
fiddle.
Same thing but different style. But it's just not a style that I've done a lot of, you know, exploring. And
we're gonna add some fiddle to the next Lost Symphony
Do you know?
record.
By the way, I heard when I was talking to Itzcock Perlman the other day that fiddle is actually the jazz of classical. That it's the ultimate. So if you can play violin, first chair, classical, that fiddle is actually the next step.
I'll plead the fifth.
All right, Mr. Epstein.
Oh my God.
Oh, okay, I have to ask you with jazz, Rodolfo. So we have all these stories of rock and roll stars backstage, but when I've met some of the craziest people in my life, they play jazz. What's it like with these? Who's crazier? Because now we're talking about this earlier. Again, I'm going to go back to Jason Costa because he's a drinker. He loves partying backstage. He's like, there's no parties back anymore. It's not like Def Leppard getting fluffed under the stage during the guitar solo. Like, it doesn't happen anymore. What's the weirdest shit you've ever seen happen at a jazz gig?
Oh, man. And early on, I mean, there's so many. The jazz guys are definitely disastrous when it comes to this stuff.
Well, that's why we want to hear about it. I love disasters.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. There's so many, but Siobhán is reminiscing, but because she's been around some of these crazy things. But one of the first real amazing thing was I used to play with these guys that they're still like around the Miami scene, but they're like old timer guys that I really learned a lot back when I first started. And we started the first song of the gig, and the bass player and the piano player are really good friends. They're both amazing players, but crazy guys. And the bass player just puts the upright bass on the floor and just goes to the piano and starts screaming at him. Screaming, and I'm just hearing all this. Fuck, like, and the pianist still playing amazing. He's like, has this guy here. I'm still playing, but like scared to death. And the saxophonist is looking at me, kind of playing at it. Then he grabs the bass and keeps playing again. Because the piano player was like telling him the chords of the first song, like his version of the chords. Because of course that's the other thing in jazz. It's like,
dude, you go to the
D
gotta
know
over
they
F,
change it. Right.
Not just the D, the D over F. It has to give the suspension feel, or it doesn't fucking work.
Man, exactly like that. Exactly like that. And this guy on piano was amazing, but he was also nuts and also so particular about that stuff.
Well, that's hilarious because you're so serious about making a song work that you actually throw down your bass in front of a live crowd while you're playing to then have a sidebar with your keyboard player about the way you're going to play music that's supposed to be free.
Right. That's why it's ridiculous.
What was the name of the band?
Yeah.
Big Brother?
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's so ridiculous. Jazz guys definitely take, and we do, I guess, take ourselves way too seriously sometimes.
You don't say.
Yeah. So it's like...
Wait, can we hear another story? Because that was hilarious. I want to hear more.
Yeah, well,
You need to humanize jazz for me because Cory and I we know rock guys. We know people that play in fusion bands, prog guys. The jazz people don't talk to us. They're off somewhere else. The country people like throw us a bone and go, well, if you want to come to Nashville, you can make some money. You can take those rock chops and get better. But jazz people are like elitists. They're over there doing their thing. So I want to know, like, what are you guys talking about when we're over here playing Maiden?
Well, this same piano player, in this case, he was the guy that was upset at the bass player. The bass player was the one that did that whole thing. On another gig with those same guys, we had a guest. Amazing.
So this didn't deter you from doing another gig? Was there a conversation after the gig about, like, let's try not to melt down in front of people?
No, because I was scared to death of those guys. So I was like, I acted like nothing had happened.
That's what drummers do.
Yeah.
David Aberzi said when he joined Guns N' Roses that Axl Rose singled him out and said, "You laugh at all my jokes," and he goes, "I don't want to get fired."
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So we had a guest guitar player that's amazing. He lives in New York. He's one of the best guys out there. And we were with that same piano player, but he brought 2 amps because that's the new thing with the jazz guys. I don't know if it's the same rock. Like even if in a
No,
tiny,
it's backwards.
Yeah, it's going the other
having
way.
two amps to like having a Kemper and no cab.
Right, exactly.
I used to bring 2 full stack amps, and I would use a Digitech 2120 into a Mesa, and then a VHT, and then have the full things and an
Jesus
ABY
Christ.
switch that wasn't grounded. That sounded like total horse shit.
Yeah.
And every sound guy would just look at me like, "Oh no."
yeah,
And now, if I show up to a gig, which I don't have any because nobody cares and it's a pandemic anyway, but I didn't have any before that. I have a rack-mounted Kemper that can just go right into the board and then just give me a signal through the thing, and then that's fine. I don't even want to care. My back hurts.
yeah. No, if that's the case, then it's completely the opposite because guys are now bringing 2 amps to a tiny cafe gig.
Oh, you guys are assholes.
because of the stereo sound on the jazz electric guitar. But this is like everybody now. But this is one of the first guys that was started to do that. This is back in like 2008 or 7 or something. And on the first song, this piano player just walked off because of that. Because he's like,
Wait,
we're
did you
playing
have
at
a
this
sound
small
check
gig.
ahead of time? Did you have a sound check? Did he see the amps before he walked on stage?
He saw them and he was annoyed. And he's playing acoustic piano, so he was annoyed. And on the first song, his first guitar solo, and of course was loud, was amazing but loud, because this guy just plays like that.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, you guys don't need me here. He just left on the first song. So I know this was my upbringing when I first started playing gigs with Jet.
That's
and
funny.
I was like, man, this is crazy.
You can
That's
handle
nice.
Do you still
anything
play
now.
with this guy?
Well-
Do you still play with this guy?
No, he had a meltdown. I don't even want to go.
So this wasn't the meltdown. This wasn't the meltdown.
We're gonna have to dive deeper. It's on the next episode. We're coming up at the end of this hour. Can you just plug your website and how
Please.
people can find you, and then we'll continue talking in the next hour.
Sure. Yeah. So I only have artist page on Facebook, I guess, and my website, which is rodolfozuniga.com. So that's pretty easy to find.
Great.
And I am in the process of uploading some more stuff up there, especially like I've been recording through the pandemic a bunch of songs at home, basically.
Nice.
And video and audio and a chart, more jazz stuff, complicated jazz stuff, sort of.
We'll be sure
For
to link.
people to download lessons.
Yeah,
and stuff.
we'll be sure to
And
link.
we'll send
link that
all
up.
of that. And I just want to say thank you on behalf of us in 2020. We'd love to have you stick around if you're willing to talk to us more about the neurosis behind jazz. And thank you so much. And I just want to tell you that it really, going and watching your videos, and I encourage everybody out there, go watch this man's videos. You really play effortlessly. And it's almost obnoxious because I played with Paul in our band for so long, who plays effortlessly as well. And you take people like you for granted because it doesn't look like to the mere plebeian mortal that you're killing it. Because when you watch Virgil Donati or Mike Mangini, they're like hitting rototoms and things over here. So you can't ignore the four-way coordination. With you, you're like subtly doing these little things. You're doing like the rabbit foot with the bottom here and there. Like, I gotta tell you, man, if I was as good as you, I'd show off a whole lot more. That's my only advice. Watch that guy, Zoltan, who plays with Vince Neil.
Yeah, Vince.
Yeah, he puts his foot up on the drums. He hits the snare, all the cymbals from underneath. You gotta be like that guy.
Oh my
because
God.
honestly, you're so fucking good that I could never. Where you were 16 saying I can't be that good, I'm 37 saying I can't be that good. I just want to see you play a whole show with that pianist just twirling a stick with one hand, going, I can do this. And with that, you've been 2020. See you soon.
Thank you.